When I was about 10 or 11 years old, my best friend, whom I'll call Mia, and I went camping with her family. They owned a modest yet comfortable camper, and we were excited for our little adventure. On our second day, we were camped in a secluded area, far from any other campsites, enjoying the tranquility of being alone in the wilderness. Mia and I decided to take some cute photos in the woods, so we dressed up and ventured about 3/4 of a mile from our campsite. We stumbled upon a peculiar, isolated stretch of road, around 100 feet long, which seemed out of place but perfect for our photo backdrop. As we were posing and snapping pictures, we suddenly heard whistling. Assuming it was just a random passerby, we continued with our photo session. While discussing poses, we noticed a middle-aged man of Asian descent in the distance, still whistling. He seemed oblivious to our presence until I pointed out that he had the same backpack as mine. He casually remarked, "Yeah, only cool people have this backpack," which made me chuckle, but I also felt an instinctive urge to leave the area. Mia and I were now quite close to him, and as he stepped onto the road, we instinctively backed away. His next question, "Where is your campsite?" set off alarm bells in our heads. Wisely, we pointed in the opposite direction of our actual camp. His follow-up question about whether our parents were watching gave us chills. In a moment of panic, I blurted out that they were nearby. His chilling response, "Okay, because you could get murdered out here," sent a wave of fear through me. After this unsettling interaction, he walked away, still whistling nonchalantly. We hurried back to the campsite and told Mia's parents about the encounter. They found it strange and advised us to stay close for the rest of the evening. Trying to put the incident behind us, we enjoyed a dinner of hot dogs. Later, Mia's brother's friend dared us to shout "Skinwalker" 3 times into the woods. Thinking it was just a silly game, we did it without a second thought. That night, as everyone else slept, Mia and I were playing Roblox before deciding to sleep. I was in a bunk bed, and she was on a couch bed. Just as I was drifting off to sleep, I heard scratching sounds coming from the wall behind my head, which was the exterior of the camper. Startled, I asked Mia if she heard it, but she hadn't. The scratching continued intermittently, and when I heard it again, I told Mia. She then admitted she heard it too. We were both terrified, especially when we started hearing the same whistling sound from earlier, circling around the camper. In tears and frightened, Mia decided to wake her mom. The noises stopped as soon as her mom appeared. Although I was exhausted, I remember her mom comforting us and staying with us until we fell asleep. The next morning, we woke up with puffy eyes and dried tears, still unsure of what had happened the night before and the intentions of the man we had encountered. It was a relief to have made it through the night safely, and I vowed never to ignore the sound of whistling in the woods again. Story number 2. Living in the quiet countryside of Minnesota, about 40 minutes from the nearest bustling town or neighborhood, suits me perfectly. The solitude is what I love the most. Camping is one of my favorite pastimes, along with fishing. I own a trusty truck and a compact rowboat, ideal for solitary fishing trips. The boat is light enough for me to manage alone, fitting snugly in the back of my truck with the tailgate down, securely strapped. It's always a pleasure to pack a cooler of beers and my fishing gear and head to the nearby lakes in my boat. I'm quite cautious about maintaining the boat, particularly because I'm aware of the risks of transferring invasive species between water bodies. After each outing, I meticulously clean and wax the boat. A beautiful, vintage Sears aluminum rowboat that once belonged to my father. One day, I decided to explore some remote fishing spots, accessible only via neglected, old roads leading to secluded ponds, relics of private fishing areas from decades past. I'm no stranger to such hidden gems, often enjoying the challenge of clearing fallen trees and debris to reach my destination. This particular path was overgrown and neglected, exactly how I like them. After some effort clearing the way, I reached a serene lake, set in a small clearing. It was the perfect size for rowing across in about 10 minutes. Quickly, I unloaded my boat and beers, and within 20 minutes, I was blissfully alone on the water, my beer cooler in tow. There's something uniquely satisfying about enjoying a cold pier while floating in solitude. However, my tranquility was soon disrupted. From the shore, I spotted a tall, slender creature standing upright on its hind legs, with elongated, stick-like arms and robust legs. Despite the distance, I thought I could make out large brown eyes. It seemed almost intelligent, and I initially brushed it off as a trick of my imagination. But as I continued to observe, I realized this was no hallucination. Judging from its height relative to my truck parked nearby, it must have been around 8 feet tall. It was unnerving to realize it had been watching me intently. Weaponless, as my firearm was in the truck, I felt a surge of fear. Grabbing my oars in a panic, the creature seemed to notice my movement and diverted its gaze, which somehow made me feel even more uneasy. It then began to curiously inspect my truck, tapping on it and possibly examining its reflection. Frozen with horror, I could only watch as the creature emitted a series of shrill cries before darting into the woods on all fours, vanishing almost instantly. Rowing back to shore was an ordeal. My arms were weak, and my heart raced uncontrollably. I was gripped by a chilling sensation that didn't leave me until I was safely home. On reaching the shore, I briefly contemplated abandoning my boat, but instead, I dashed to my car, grabbed my sidearm, and despite my fear, hastily loaded up the boat and departed. Story number 3. I had recently moved to a remote town in the northernmost part of my country for educational pursuits, finding myself in a cozy, 2-bedroom apartment. It was ideally situated within walking distance to my school, supermarkets, and the city center. The apartment was on the 2nd floor of a quaint, 4-apartment building. My only neighbor was Lucas, a friendly guy living downstairs who helped me settle in. Across from us stood a large, attractive yellow building, clearly visible from my living room window. Despite feeling a bit intrusive, I often found myself gazing into the apartments opposite, driven by curiosity. Over time, I became familiar with the residents and their routines. There was the young couple on the 1st floor, often engaging in intimate moments against their window. Watching felt intrusive, yet their open display made it hard to look away. Another apartment was home to a couple in their 30s with a newborn, mostly keeping their curtains drawn. Then there was the pair who seemed content to lounge in bed all day, their curtains usually closed. An enigmatic individual occupied the apartment next to the young woman's. I only ever saw a bald head peeking out, which made me wonder if they found my peering odd months past, and I noticed changes. The young couple's apartment became dark and seemingly empty. Initially, I thought they were on vacation, but as time went on, it seemed they had moved out without my notice. Similarly, the apartment of the young woman also appeared abandoned, her cat nowhere to be seen. Neither of these apartments showed up in rental listings, which I found peculiar. Things got stranger when the couple with a baby also seemed to have vacated their home. Their once familiar routines ceased, leaving their apartment dark and empty like the others. Now, only the movie-watching couple and the mysterious bald individual remained. However, even the flickering light from the couple's television stopped, adding to the eerie atmosphere. I began to question my sanity or if the yellow building was simply an unpleasant place to live. Time passed, and the apartments remained vacant, except for the one with the constant light. One night, I thought I saw lights in all the empty apartments, but when I looked again, only the bald man's window was lit. Concerned, I discussed my observations with Lucas. He suggested I might have been half asleep and reassured me I wasn't going insane. When I inquired about the building, he mentioned its dark past. The last tenant in the lit apartment had murdered all the other residents over 30 years ago. I researched the story and found it to be true, sending chills down my spine. That evening, as I peeked out my window, the light in the murderer's apartment was off, and the bald man was nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, a light flickered on in the young woman's apartment, and I saw a tall, thin man with long black hair, grinning and waving at me. Terrified, I fell to the floor. Moments later, there was a knock at my door. It was Lucas, concerned after hearing a loud noise from my apartment. He invited me downstairs for tea and some PlayStation gaming. His kindness and the normalcy of the moment gradually eased my fears, leaving me grateful for his company in the midst of such unsettling events. Lucas and I settled in his apartment, the warm glow of the lamps creating a comforting atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the chilling events of the evening. As we sipped tea, I recounted my experiences, watching his expressions shift between concern and disbelief. Lucas listened intently, occasionally glancing towards the ceiling as if expecting some sign from my apartment above. After a few rounds of PlayStation, my nerves had calmed significantly. The normalcy of playing games and chatting about mundane topics provided a much-needed distraction. Lucas then shared his own eerie experiences in the building, adding a layer of mystery to the already unsettling situation. According to him, there had always been strange occurrences, unexplained noises, fleeting shadows, and a general sense of unease that he attributed to the building's dark history. Feeling more composed, I thanked Lucas and made my way back to my apartment. The corridor seemed darker than usual, the light flickering as I ascended the stairs. Once inside, I double-checked the locks and peered cautiously out the window. The building across the street was shrouded in darkness, save for the one lit window. The figure I had seen earlier was no longer there. As I prepared for bed, a deep sense of unease settled over me. Despite Lucas's reassurance, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. My sleep was restless, filled with nightmares of shadowy figures and unseeing eyes staring from the building across. The next few days were a blur of anxiety and apprehension. I avoided looking out the window, fearing what I might see. The once comforting view had become a source of dread. I started to notice subtle changes in my own apartment. Items slightly moved, unfamiliar creaks in the floorboards, and an inexplicable coldness that seemed to linger in the air. One evening, as I returned from school, I found the door to my apartment slightly ajar. Heart pounding, I pushed it open to find everything seemingly in place. But as I stepped inside, I felt a chilling breeze and noticed a faint, unfamiliar scent in the air. It was then that I saw it, a small, handwritten note on the kitchen table that simply read, "You're not alone." Panicked, I ran to Lucas's apartment, but there was no answer. Desperate, I contacted the police, who arrived promptly to investigate. They found no sign of forced entry or disturbance, suggesting that I might have left the door unlocked. However, the note was unexplainable, adding to the mystery. That night, I stayed at a friend's place, too scared to return to my apartment. The next day, I learned from the police that Lucas had been found in his apartment, unresponsive but alive, with no memory of the past 24 hours. They suspected carbon monoxide poisoning, although no source was found. The events that followed only deepened the mystery. The apartments across the street were inspected by the police, and they discovered unsettling signs of recent habitation despite being supposedly vacant. Strange symbols were found etched into the walls of the empty apartments, and the belongings of the previous tenants were oddly arranged in ritualistic patterns. With no rational explanation, the building was cordoned off for further investigation. Rumors began to circulate of a curse or some malevolent presence linked to the building's tragic past. The neighborhood was consumed with fear and superstition, and many, including myself, decided to move away. I never did learn the truth behind the mysterious events and the eerie figure I had seen. The yellow building remained a topic of hushed whispers and fearful glances. Even now, years later, the memory of that time sends a shiver down my spine. The experience left me with an unshakable belief that some places are touched by darkness, harboring secrets that are best left undiscovered.
This story is based on real events and true experiences. Names and locations have been altered for privacy.